Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Here we are again, sitting in the waiting room outside the family therapist's office, the one my wife insisted we see. Week after week for 2 months now, we've been coming here, and today marks our 10th session. But neither she nor the therapist knows that this will be the last one. I've made up my mind, and it's a surprise they won't expect. After today, they can analyze our problems all they want, but without me. As for the payments, that'll be my wife's responsibility. Maybe you've heard stories about therapists with questionable methods, but I never thought I'd encounter one firsthand. In my mind, I call her the fraud. Her bias is evident. She's clearly prejudiced against men and seems solely interested in justifying my wife's actions without considering my perspective. Violetta chose this therapist herself, ignoring my reservations. Hardly surprising. We could have chosen someone neutral together, someone who could help us rebuild our relationship. But Violetta insisted on her choice, creating a setup where she could steer each session in her favor. I'm not against therapy per se. It's just that I can't call this therapy. Every issue Violetta brings up somehow comes back to me. Thomas, you have to understand that you haven't provided enough for your wife. But that ends today. Perhaps, though, it's worth explaining how we got to this point. Violetta and I met in college, married right after graduation, and have been together for 30 years. We have 2 wonderful children, a son and a daughter, now in college, and I'm grateful for them every day, though I sometimes wonder how they turned out to be such good people. I did my best to be a caring father, especially since Violetta was often absent. The kids even started calling me Dad Mom. It hurt at first, but later, I realized they were just acknowledging the truth. I was filling both parental roles. I packed their lunches, helped with homework, drove them to practices, attended parent-teacher meetings, often cooked and cleaned. Meanwhile, Violetta focused on herself, her work, her exhaustion. She did contribute, of course, but gradually her interest in family life faded, replaced by attachments to everything outside our home. Over time, her complaints about work turned into criticism of me. I wasn't trying hard enough or was always doing things wrong. We didn't have enough money, and our vacations didn't satisfy her. The kids noticed this too. But their hugs and "Dad, you're the best" kept me going. Ever heard the metaphor about the boiling frog? I was that frog, slowly adjusting to the rising heat, until one day, I finally leapt out of the pot. I spent years trying to figure out what was wrong with Violetta. Her family is a web of dysfunction, a classic case where parents use their children as pawns. Violetta's mother had countless affairs, and Violetta was dragged into them, hiding them from her father. She was taught to lie from a young age, covering for her mother's shopping trips. Her father knew but was too broken to confront it. He'd come home with a drink in hand, ready to lash out. Violetta's childhood home was a battlefield. No warmth, no unity, only conflict. She spent nights in her room, hiding from the inevitable fights downstairs. It's no surprise she turned out the way she did. Deception and manipulation became her norm, and it took me years to realize how deeply ingrained these patterns were, how incapable she was of truly embracing marriage. Understanding this was painful, but it helped me hang on until our kids grew up. At some point, I began therapy myself. I told my therapist about my wife's past and the gradual decay of our marriage. My therapist made it clear. Her job was to support me, to help me find balance and avoid the emptiness that had consumed Violetta. She taught me to prioritize my well-being, to stand up for myself, and most importantly, to live for our children. I learned to keep the door open, just in case Violetta might one day join us in building a real family. When the kids left for college, the house suddenly felt suffocatingly small. I realized I couldn't keep living like this, and something inside hinted that it was only a matter of time before Violetta would destroy the last remnants of our marriage. My therapist once explained that a child raised in chaos becomes so accustomed to disorder that, as an adult, they unconsciously crave it. For Violetta, stability was foreign, something she had to disrupt to feel at home. When I grasped this, everything became as clear as day. I thought to myself, maybe I wasn't imagining it. I'd noticed signs before but never wanted to admit them. Now, with the kids gone, finances stabilized, and the mortgage nearly paid off, we had both the time and the means to reconnect as a couple. Yet it was clear that Violetta was on the verge of tearing everything apart. Lost in these thoughts, I heard the office door creak, and another couple entered the waiting room. The man looked utterly exhausted, his eyes red, while his wife's face wore a smug expression. Their session with the therapist, whom I had privately dubbed the fraud, went exactly as I had predicted. By this point, I knew what would happen next. The therapist would jot down a few notes, and then it would be our turn. Soon, she called out, "Violetta, Thomas, I'm ready for you." It was a rehearsed, impersonal invitation, like, "Next, please." Violetta settled on the couch, and I took a seat to her right, back to the door. "Thomas, why don't you sit next to your wife?" suggested the therapist. "I'm comfortable here, thank you," I replied. "This chair is better for my back." It was a small, satisfying bit of defiance. The therapist looked annoyed but continued. "Thomas, do you have anything to add from last session?" "Yes," I leaned forward. "We come here week after week, yet nothing we discuss convinces me that Violetta has been faithful. My suspicions aren't going away." Before Violetta could respond, the therapist cut in. "Thomas, I've told you there's no reason to believe your wife is unfaithful. This is all in your head, and it's time to put it to rest." Ignoring my reaction, she turned to Violetta. "So, what would you like to discuss today?" Her bias was almost laughable. Violetta began listing my supposed faults, focusing on how I don't support her. She spoke without hesitation, airing her grievances. "He's annoyed when I work late, doesn't like me going out with friends, and always wants to know where I am." The therapist nodded in sync with Violetta's complaints, as if they had fallen into a familiar rhythm. My thoughts began to drift. In one of my first solo sessions, before I fully grasped the fraud's bias, I had admitted that I suspected Violetta of cheating. I had no proof, just intuition. The therapist dismissed it immediately, saying it was all in my head. Now, months later, my suspicions had only intensified, and I'd long since lost respect for her opinion. "Thomas, are you listening?" The therapist's voice pulled me back. "Yes, I heard," I replied. "Apparently I don't support her." "Violetta says you're ignoring her needs," the therapist continued. "You don't respect her work schedule, and you're jealous of her time with friends." I looked her square in the eyes. "The problem is, I feel like she's been unfaithful. I can't just ignore that." Her face tightened with irritation. "Thomas, it's time to let go of these childish doubts. I've told you repeatedly, Violetta isn't cheating. She deserves a partner who can manage his own insecurities. If you can't, maybe she'd be better off with someone who can." Her voice was laced with disdain, and then she turned to Violetta. "He no longer cares for the house as he once did. The grass grows tall and wild as if out of spite, and the peeling paint seems to cry out for help, and that's just the beginning." My reaction was too obvious. "Thomas, why are you smiling?" Violet asked irritably. "This is supposed to be serious." I muttered an apology, barely sincere. But even as I said it, my thoughts started drifting again, drowning out her words. Violet insists on getting to our therapy sessions by herself. I work very close to her route. We could easily go together. But no, she firmly claims she'll meet me there. And the strange thing, her evenings after the sessions always ended up occupied by something. Finally, exhausted by suspicion, I hired a private investigator to follow her on those days. It didn't take long to confirm my fears. Every Thursday, like clockwork, she met with Grayson Gonzalez at a hotel by the highway. This wasn't a fleeting affair. Their meetings had become a ritual. Suddenly, everything became clear. This affair had started a long time ago, meticulously planned. Even in her infidelity, Violet remained guarded, as if still holding something back. She was broken in ways I hadn't even realized, always on edge, even in unfaithfulness. They even rented a regular room, allowing the detective to install a camera and record everything. From then on, therapy sessions were merely a cover while I gathered evidence. Now I had 3 adversaries: my wife, Grayson, and the so-called therapist. When everything was ready, I arranged a meeting with Grayson's wife, Lillian, and handed over the files. She hired my attorney and began taking decisive action. Although Lillian seemed delicate, my attorney assured me she'd see it through. That reassurance fueled my sense of justice. It felt like justice was finally drawing near. "Thomas, are you even listening to me?" Violet's voice pulled me back to reality. "Yes, I heard you. The house needs repainting," I replied. Then there was a knock, sharp in the silence. Who could be here now? The therapist rose, offering, "I'll get it, it's probably for me." "For you? Thomas, this is our sacred time together," protested Violet, her irritation obvious. Ignoring her words, I walked to the door and opened it. On the threshold stood Grayson and Lillian. "Come in, both of you. Perfect timing," I smiled. Grayson looked unsettled, while Lillian, despite a trembling hand on her cane, was resolute. Grayson extended his hand, uncertainty in his eyes. "My wife arranged everything. I'm not sure why we're here." "Let me explain, Grayson." I gestured to the sofa. "You know my wife Violet, don't you?" His face went pale and he began to stammer. I've heard of her, but we never—" "No need to pretend, Grayson," I interrupted calmly. "After all, this is a safe space, as the fraud would say." The therapist, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, her voice tense. "Thomas, what is going on here?" I just smiled, letting the truth fill the room, ready for the secrets to unravel. "Why are you interrupting such a meeting?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady but firm. "Apologies, Miss Jacobs. This is Grayson Gonzalez, the man my wife has been seeing for almost 2 years, I replied, and my words rang out like an accusation. Before anyone could interrupt me, I continued, "If anyone thinks this is just paranoia, let me assure you it's all very real. I have plenty of photos and videos of them together, like at a hotel, for instance." I looked over at Grayson and gestured to the empty chair next to Violetta. "Why don't you take a seat beside her, Grayson? Since you're willing to share a bed, surely a chair won't trouble you." Then I turned to Lillian and gently kissed her on the cheek. "Lillian, always a pleasure to see you. How do you find this place? Quite cozy, isn't it?" Lillian accepted the invitation with a smile, her gaze meeting her husband's piercingly. I took a seat across from them, leaving the coffee table between us. Violetta and Grayson were to my right, while the swindler, clearly stunned, sat to my left, her mouth opening and closing in silent shock. "Isn't it cozy?" I noted. I turned to Lillian again. "You look wonderful as always. How was your day?" "Better than usual, Thomas," she replied with a hint of relief in her voice. "It feels like a weight has finally been lifted off my shoulders." Her resilience, despite all she had endured, was remarkable. Not long ago, Miss Jacobs had brushed off my suspicions about Violetta as mere paranoia, but Lillian laughed quietly, her composure unshaken. Glancing around the room, I addressed everyone. "So, who's ready to see the proof?" I held up my tablet. "Anyone want to watch one of the videos?" I looked directly at Violetta. "How about you? Would you like to see the very non-existent footage you assured me didn't exist?" She sat there, silent, her quietness echoing through the room. I shifted my gaze to Grayson. "You know, taking my wife is one thing, but I was her husband for a long time. Even after her betrayal, I still feel some responsibility for her." I let the words sink in. "But it seems to me to you she's, well, nothing more than a plaything." I looked at Violetta. "If you had told me you wanted this, maybe things would have been different. But to choose secrecy and deceit with him, that was your choice." Violetta's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. Yet her grief was hard for me to comprehend. She knew our marriage was over. Grayson's marriage was also finished. Now they could be together. So what were the tears for? She had shown me I was nothing to her, except as a support she couldn't find within herself. Finally, Violetta spoke, her voice trembling. "I never wanted you to find out this way. I'm sorry, Thomas. I never meant to hurt you." She kept murmuring apologies and regrets. It would have been laughable if it didn't look so pitiful. "Violetta," I replied, remaining unflinching, "you had 2 years to think about this." I turned to Grayson, who sat sprawled out beside her. "And you?" Your wife bore you 2 children. She has her own needs, and this is how you thank her? Did you ever think even once about acting like a responsible person?" Grayson's face turned pale with anger, but he said nothing. Both of them continued mumbling empty apologies and weak excuses until a knock on the door broke the silence. I looked at Lillian. "It seems our final guest has arrived." The swindler, who had been remarkably quiet until now, squirmed noticeably in her chair. Ignoring her discomfort, I shrugged and opened the door. A middle-aged man in a worn suit entered, and I pointed him to the sofa. "There they are," I said, nodding towards the guilty couple. The scene was fully set. The man approached the 2 cheaters, handed each of them a sealed envelope, and announced, "Violetta Harper, Grayson Gonzalez, you have been officially served." Snapping a quick photo as proof, he turned and left, marking his task complete. On his way out, he gave me a sly smile, clearly savoring the unusual nature of the situation. Without another word, he exited the room, and I closed the door behind him before returning to my seat. "Well, this is a day to remember, isn't it?" I remarked, glancing at the clock and noting that our time was nearly up. In the few remaining moments, I addressed Miss Jacobs, the counselor, and added dryly, "Perhaps you can help them understand what happened here today and how things went so wrong." Standing, I extended my hand to Lillian, helping her up, and together we left the office. As we walked slowly down the hallway, I gently asked, "Are you going to be okay?" She gave a slight nod. "I think so. When you first showed me the evidence of what they did, I felt like my world was falling apart. I kept asking myself, how could the man I married betray me like this? But now I realize he's not the person I thought he was. He's not the man I married, or at least not the man I imagined him to be." Her words resonated with me, reminding me of my own feelings. She continued, "All I'm really losing are memories, a version of our life that wasn't even real." She looked up, her expression softening. "But I still have my kids. Someday I'll have grandchildren too. I'll get through this." "And you have friends," I reminded her. "Maybe someday you'll even consider me one of them." She smiled at me warmly, sadness reflected in her eyes, and she placed her hand on mine. "I already do," she replied. "So, how about lunch with a friend?" For the first time that day, a genuine smile lit up her face. "I'd like that," she said. We each drove our own cars, but soon found ourselves at the same table, sharing a quiet meal. Though the shadow of the day's events lingered between us, we both understood that this moment was something we had anticipated and, in a way, awaited. It marked the end of 2 marriages and the dreams that went with them. We spent some time discussing our former spouses, but soon the conversation turned to lighter topics. We talked about our children, shared updates on mutual acquaintances, and even discovered connections we hadn't known before. The understanding that we had a support system brought me a sense of comfort. "You know," I said with a smile, "once all of this is behind us, our friends will probably start introducing us to every single person they know." The thought made me wince, and she laughed softly. "Maybe it's not such a bad idea," she said. "Who knows? You might even enjoy it." I just shook my head, sighing half-jokingly. During our conversation, I felt a renewed sense of optimism about what the future might bring. Eventually, I headed home, not giving much thought to where Violetta and Grayson had gone, or how they had left. Perhaps they went together to plan their defense, or find a lawyer, or maybe they simply disappeared into one of their usual hideaways. Most likely, she was driving him, considering Lillian had taken their car. Of course, nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. Later, when Violetta finally returned home, she began apologizing and accusing, somehow twisting everything to make it seem as if I had forced her into infidelity. Her words spun in circles, once again shifting the blame onto me. I wondered if she was still sharing her thoughts with that same counselor. Eventually, her energy drained, and she broke down in tears, utterly exhausted. I knew it was time to speak. In a calm, steady voice, I told her, "Violetta, I've felt pity for you throughout most of our marriage. I know your past was filled with pain, a childhood no one should have to endure. I always thought you were broken but strong, that if I gave you enough love, you would heal, that you would grow into the person you wanted to be. I paused, meeting her gaze. But Violetta, you're incapable of healing. You're broken in ways I can't fix. Every time we managed to move forward, you found a way to destroy everything again. It seems you only know how to live in chaos and sorrow. Taking a breath, I continued, I can't live like this anymore. I can't stay with someone who lies and cheats. This is the end. Our children are grown, and it's time for us to go our separate ways. I paused before ending with the words she needed to hear. You need help, Violetta. True healing requires genuine therapy, not the kind that merely echoes your words or blindly supports your actions without questioning them. When you find a real therapist, allow them to guide the process. I know you're used to control, but it's this very need to dominate that hinders your growth. By directing every step, you won't reach the clarity you're seeking. You need an experienced guide to help you dive deep into self-awareness, to confront shadows of the past and ultimately to be freed from their weight. I urged her to seek real help, almost pleading, but I doubted that my words truly reached her. It seemed as though her mind was fortified, shielded from these ideas, surrounded by fears she was unwilling to face. The bitter truth was that she was too afraid to look into the depths of her own darkness. Deciding to divorce Violetta was agonizing, tearing me apart. I wrestled with our vows, the promises to be there in sickness and in health. Without a doubt, Violetta was unwell. But after much reflection, I realized that despite her inner battles, she still understood right from wrong, and betrayal was still betrayal. It's been 4 years since my last therapy session. I moved on, and our divorce was finalized around 4 years ago. I ended up with the larger share of our assets, thanks to a prenuptial agreement her mother had insisted on. What did I learn from all of this? When love fades and anger wanes, all that remains is a quiet, deep sadness, a sense of loss. I lost something important, but that loss began long before our marriage was officially dissolved. I also let go of the future we might have had, if that future ever truly existed. But life doesn't stop at losses. I moved to a new neighborhood, stayed close to friends who, over time, became a greater support to me than therapy could have been. I built my life around hobbies and interests I'd often set aside for her wishes. Eventually, I met a remarkable woman who shares my dreams. We're cautious, both scarred by past wounds, and we're taking things slowly. I feel hopeful, but I'm not rushing. As for Grayson, he left the marriage completely broke. Through all of this, I learned an important lesson. We can build a better life if we stay true to ourselves, keep looking forward, and embrace life's gifts. As for my ex-wife, I doubt she will ever find true happiness. She seems incapable of seeing the beauty and joy life has to offer. She will always be reaching for something unattainable, missing out on the good that's close by, and closing herself off from those around her. I feel a kind of sadness for her. But now I understand that I can't change her nature. All I can do is move forward. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started.
I imitated his high-pitched voice in front of our friends, and, no shock here, it made its way back to him. Now, on their advice, I'm writing this on Reddit, supposedly to gain some perspective, as they phrased it. They think I'm the unreasonable one, which I find hard to accept. Maybe I did push it a little too far, but I'm not entirely to blame here, and it feels absurd to think our whole marriage might end over something so minor. I could really use some guidance on this. For a little context, I'm Grace, and my husband, let's call him Levi, and I have been married for 8 years. Until now, I thought we had a pretty solid relationship. I'd say we had a good thing going, or at least, that's what I believed. Levi is a deeply sensitive guy, not always the easiest to understand, and he's got a few quirks I've generally found pretty amusing. One of those quirks is his unusually high voice, which to me just adds to his uniqueness. I thought it was something we could laugh about together. I had no idea he felt so strongly about it. He's never really given me any reason to think it was a sore point. Occasionally, if I laughed too hard, he'd make a comment, but I always figured he was just being his usual sensitive self. I honestly didn't think he cared all that much since he didn't often bring it up. My friends think I'm oblivious and even harsh in how I've treated him. Sure, I joke about his voice from time to time, but it's funny to me. And not just to me. My friends laugh too, so I know I'm not alone in this yes, I've made fun of other things, like his hobbies or the little things he worries about. Who wouldn't? He can get worked up over the smallest issues, and sometimes I feel like I need to point it out, help him snap back to reality. Maybe my friends think I'm trying to defend myself, but I'm honestly just laying it all out here. I want my friends, and all of you, to understand that I'm not holding back or covering up. Sure, I've made jokes about his birdwatching hobby or downplayed his anxieties here and there. I might have even brushed off some of his accomplishments, but I always tried to keep it light or add a bit of tough love. My intent was to help him build a thicker skin and handle life with a bit more resilience. There's more to this than just the jokes. In arguments, I've pointed out his emotional side because, honestly, he can be intense. I'll admit that I've teased him about his looks or questioned why he needs so much reassurance. And yes, I've used sarcasm when he gets overly romantic, especially when he does those over-the-top, cheesy things. It's hard not to laugh. I realize now that I might have embarrassed him in front of others or made him feel small about his choices, but I genuinely thought I was grounding him, giving him a reality check. It never occurred to me that he might need constant reassurance or a softer touch. I'm just not someone who sugarcoats things, and I didn't think he'd take my words so seriously. Besides, whenever I joked about his voice, everyone, including our friends, would laugh with me. Levi usually chuckled too, so I assumed he found it funny as well. To me, it was all harmless fun, and his laughter seemed like a sign that he saw it that way too. Isn't this something couples do? Tease each other a bit? Sometimes he'd bring it up later, maybe when we were alone, saying things like, "I wish you wouldn't joke about that," or asking, "Do you really think it's that funny?" He seemed a bit serious, but I just figured it was part of his sensitivity. I thought he'd either outgrow it or, in time, laugh along with me. I never really stopped to consider that he might not be able to simply brush off my comments. I figured I wasn't saying anything harsh enough to sting, right? Lots of couples joke around, even tease each other about quirks and personality traits. I thought we were in that same lighthearted zone. Teasing him about his voice or sensitivity seemed like harmless fun to me, not something that would genuinely upset him. And if it truly bothered him, wouldn't he have said something more obvious, made it clear to me? I always assumed he'd speak up if I went too far. In hindsight, though, there were times he looked a bit wounded. But I brushed those looks aside, telling myself he'd let it slide, and that he wasn't the type to hold on to things. It didn't cross my mind that my words might slowly be wearing him down. Since he rarely brought it up, I took that as a sign it wasn't a big deal. Being the jokester has always been part of who I am. I can't understand why this one small comment has him so upset. Humor is my way of dealing with things, of lightening the mood. It's just me. So, the other night I was hanging out with friends, joking around as usual, and at one point, I thought of his voice. I didn't plan it. It just came up in the moment. So, I said something about how he sounds a bit like a chipmunk when he gets excited. We laughed because, come on, it's true, and it was just funny. It was just a throwaway comment, not meant to be mean. And he wasn't even there. It was just between my friends and me, not even his friends, so I thought it would stay in that space. Just some casual fun. But somehow, one of them must have told him. Now he's furious, giving me the cold shoulder like I've done something unforgivable. I'm genuinely taken aback by his reaction. I never imagined he felt so strongly about it, and to me, it just seems over the top. When he confronted me, he acted like I'd done something huge, as if I'd crossed a serious boundary. He's talking about it like it's the end of the world, even saying it's jeopardizing our marriage, which feels way out of proportion. I didn't cheat on him. I didn't deceive him. It was a harmless joke about his voice, nothing more. I didn't think he would care so much because, honestly, he's always been a bit on the sensitive side. I get that. But now he's saying he needs space and claiming he's deeply hurt. To me, it all feels so blown out of proportion, And it's honestly upsetting. What's worse, my friends are taking his side, acting like I did something terrible. Now, I'm the one who's feeling hurt, frustrated, and confused by this whole situation. I know he's sensitive, but this reaction feels like it's coming out of nowhere. I love him. I really do. But it seems like this whole thing is being made into something way bigger than it is. All I want is for him to see that it's not as serious as he's making it. Because honestly, if he can't handle a small joke like this, what does that say about us? Update. Hi Reddit. I'll admit, some of your comments have given me a bit of a wake-up call, though the criticism has been tough to take. I'm starting to see that, okay, maybe I'm not completely blameless here, but it's also not as if this whole mess is entirely my fault. Sure, I made a few jokes, but it was my friends who went and told him, making it all blow up. If they hadn't spread it around, maybe none of this would have happened. I can't believe a little joke has spiraled to this point. Things are really escalating, and I feel completely lost. My so-called friends? They're calling me selfish, and even throwing around terms like narcissist. We had a major argument the other day after we went through the comments on my original Reddit post. I'll admit it, reading some of those comments felt like taking a hit. The criticism was harsh, sometimes even vicious, and way beyond what seemed fair. So I spoke up, calling it absurd. But the moment I did, my friends were on me, accusing me of making it all about myself again. They said this was typical me, always defending myself, never really seeing the full impact of my actions. It feels as if they expect me to just accept these random judgments from people online, to nod along as if every stranger's opinion about me is gospel truth. Seriously? I can't wrap my head around how one joke and my response to it somehow morphed into a complete teardown of my character. But here I am, facing exactly that. It escalated almost instantly. My friends started rattling off a list of things they claim make me self-absorbed. How I'm always the focus, how my apologies lack sincerity, how I'm apparently oblivious to how my words land on others. It's frustrating because, from my perspective, making one mistake shouldn't erase everything else about who I am or paint me as some kind of villain. Now, it's as if every comment I make or action I take is scrutinized and turned against me, with people ready to pounce at any moment. Some friends have pulled away entirely, and others are outright confrontational. It feels like a betrayal of the deepest kind. How could people who called themselves friends turn on me so quickly? It's as if they never really knew me. I feel abandoned, misjudged, hurt, and completely alone in a way that's hard to describe. Yes, I've made mistakes, but this whole ordeal feels horribly unfair. To top it off, here's the current nightmare I'm facing. Levi, my husband, has thrown me out, and it's like he's determined to make life unbearable. He's cut me off financially, knowing full well that I don't have any savings to rely on. But he didn't stop there. He's actively undermining my career. My job depended heavily on my reputation, and he's managed to make me look so unreliable that I was let go. As if that wasn't enough, he's even shared private voice messages I sent him with our family and friends. Now everyone sees me as this heartless villain. Imagine that? He's completely humiliated me, shattered my reputation, and now even my own family thinks of me as cold, disrespectful, and cruel. He's turned them all against me, leaving me entirely isolated. Losing my job hit hard, especially because, while it wasn't a big paycheck, it was something I could have depended on now that I'm cut off financially. But he took that away too. With each passing day without an income, I'm one step closer to having nothing. It honestly feels like he's out to destroy me, and I can't understand how it's come to this. I've tried to explain my side, to make peace, but no one's willing to listen. My voice has been drowned out in the chaos he's stirred up. Sure, I accept that I played a role in all this, but Levi's actions feel deliberate, like he's set on stripping me of everything. I can barely believe this is where I am now, and I don't even know what to do next. Update. Hello, Reddit. I didn't expect this level of anger in the comments. Some of you seem to revel in tearing people down, don't you? And as I've pointed out time and again, this mess isn't entirely my fault. Everyone seems determined to cast me as the sole villain here, but that's simply not true. Yes, I made mistakes, but I didn't orchestrate this whole mess alone. It was a joke gone wrong, and somehow that's made me out to be the worst person alive. For those asking where I'm staying now, No, I'm not out on the streets, no matter how much some people might like to think so. I'm staying with my parents, and it's hardly a perfect solution. And yes, I still have bills and rent piling up, so it's not exactly a cushy situation. This is exhausting, to put it mildly. Right now, getting through each day feels nearly insurmountable. I'm struggling immensely, and yet it seems like no one notices, much less cares. Amid this, my phone and email have been bombarded with spam, endless emails, bizarre texts, and calls from unknown numbers. None of it makes sense, and it started to feel like someone's targeting me. Blocking the numbers was useless. They just kept coming, like a relentless wave crashing down on me, adding to the weight I already carry. This torrent of spam was maddening, and it felt like there would be no end to it. Throughout the day, my phone never stopped buzzing. Emails, strange calls, nonsensical messages. Blocking one source only led to another popping up. It was exhausting, and every notification made my stomach sink. I would pick up the phone, hoping it might be a normal call, only to hear an unfamiliar voice or see an incomprehensible message on the screen. My inbox became a jumbled mess, cluttered with bizarre and even hostile emails mixed with nonsense. It was as if someone were deliberately trying to unsettle me, and to think it all started as a single harmless joke. In desperation, I finally changed my phone number, hoping it would stop the chaos, but it didn't. When the spam continued, even after changing both my phone number and my Gmail, I began to think it might not be random. It started to feel personal, as though someone wanted to push me to my limits. Eventually, I wondered if Levi, or maybe someone else in our group, might be behind it or had at least played some part in it. It felt orchestrated, almost like an attack. Changing my number was no easy task. It meant updating my bank accounts and countless other services. But even after all that trouble, the spam somehow still found me. Every time I thought it was over, I'd have to change my number yet again. It was maddening, leaving me to wonder how they kept getting my new contact info. This felt like a punishment with no way out. And then, when I went back to what was once our home to gather my things, I discovered he'd already thrown them out. Clothes, keepsakes, sentimental items, gone. Apparently, he'd texted me to pick them up, but in the chaos, I missed the messages. So he'd tossed everything. Losing all those pieces of my past, those cherished memories, was like another wound on top of everything else unraveling. And as if that weren't enough, people now see me as the villain. I have no one reaching out, no support. Friends have drifted away, family seems to look at me with distrust, and I'm left feeling completely alone. And then, just when I thought I'd hit rock bottom, I was served divorce papers. It's official, and on top of all that's happened, I now have to confront the reality of divorce. The very thought is overwhelming, knowing I'll have to navigate the legal process while somehow piecing my life back together. Is this really how everything is supposed to fall apart? All of this just because of one innocent joke about a voice? I can't believe how fast everything has collapsed. One moment I was laughing with friends, and in what feels like an instant, I'm facing divorce, losing everything that once mattered. It feels surreal, like a nightmare I can't wake up from. I didn't cheat, I didn't lie, all I did was make a joke. And now, I'm left drowning in isolation. Friends who used to care act as if I no longer exist. They've rallied around my husband as if they've forgotten I'm still here, hurting too. I understand they're trying to support him, but the way they've turned their backs on me so quickly cuts deeply. I'm not some kind of monster, but that's exactly how they make me feel. Now, all I can do is try to rebuild, while struggling against shame, judgment, and the constant reminder of how much I've lost. And through all this, I'm out there, searching for a job, trying to put the pieces of my life back together. My reputation lies in ruins, and any sense of self-confidence I once had feels utterly shattered. Trying to piece my life back together feels like a mountain too high to climb, especially with everyone around me convinced I'm the villain in this story. It's like I'm trapped at the bottom of a dark pit. Every attempt to rise is met with a force pulling me back down. I never wanted things to spiral out of control like this, and I'm exhausted from trying to prove that I'm not the monster they think I am. I just want the chance to explain myself, to show that I'm capable of growth and change, that I can be better. But at this moment, it seems like no one is interested in hearing my side. So I'm here on Reddit again, hoping for some genuine advice. Where do I even start in cleaning up this mess when everyone around me seems so eager to condemn? My marriage feels like it's slipping away, and every effort I make to save it just seems to drive it further out of reach. I feel completely lost. And to those who take pleasure in watching me struggle, well, congratulations, I suppose. If you're only here to criticize, just know that I'm acutely aware of how bad things have gotten. Your words can't make me feel any worse than I already do. Update. Hey Reddit, it's been a while since I posted here, and honestly, I nearly forgot about it. I only remembered when setting up a new account, realizing I already had one. That probably says something about where my mind's been lately. Anyway, I've received a lot of messages asking for an update, so here it is, though it's far from the happy ending I'd hoped for. Here's where things stand. The divorce is final. It was shockingly fast, over in less than an hour in court. With no children and no shared finances, it was just done. Just like that. I didn't qualify for any kind of support, which stung, but the real blow was the realization that this truly was the end. I had crossed the last line. There was no turning back. I tried everything. Letters, voicemails, even showing up in person, but he wouldn't speak to me. He completely shut me out, denying me any second chance. It left me feeling desperate then, and honestly, I still do. If I could go back, I would undo everything, undo how I acted. I grew up in a family where teasing was our way of expressing affection. It was our love language. But now I realize that what I did to my husband was far from harmless. It was actually mocking. And it wasn't just occasional, it was constant. In my original post, I framed it as lighthearted teasing, but looking back, I see that I was tearing him down, humiliating him, undermining him far more often than I'd been willing to admit. Facing that truth is painful. After everything fell apart, I spiraled into a deep depression. I lost my job, and my family cut me off, saying they were done listening to my complaints. That hurt in ways I can't even begin to describe. The final blow came when they took my ex's side, openly welcoming his new girlfriend, leaving me feeling completely erased. It's isolating to see people who were supposed to care for me turn away, leaving me totally alone. Since then, I've spent a lot of time in reflection, and that's a big reason I'm writing this update. I see now that I had a serious issue with accountability. I constantly wanted to justify my actions, to make excuses, to shift the blame, and while part of me still feels like it wasn't entirely my fault, I'm not saying I'm blameless. I probably crossed lines I didn't see. Maybe I was too harsh. But I didn't think at the time that it was enough to destroy a marriage. Yet, here I am, dealing with the consequences. Now, my situation is bleak, to put it mildly. I'm bouncing from place to place, just trying to find somewhere to sleep each night. My career? That's a joke at this point. Every attempt to restore my reputation has ended in disaster. People avoid me, and whenever I try to explain my side, they look at me like I'm some kind of villain. Every door I approach seems to slam shut in my face. Not only am I without a husband, but without friends, too. None of them seem willing to give me a second chance. It's maddening that I can't even share my perspective without being judged or dismissed. And to add to the humiliation, my ex has moved on and appears to be serious about his new girlfriend. I can't lie, it's deeply humiliating. I still find myself slipping into the habit of scrolling through his social media. I'm fully aware that I shouldn't be doing it, but some part of me just won't stop. Seeing him happy in those photos fuels this ache inside me, like I'm the one left behind with nothing to show. Sometimes I even end up on his new girlfriend's page and, though it's childish, I can't help but dislike her. Lately, it seems like the only way forward might be to leave this place altogether. What's left for me here? My reputation is in ruins. Nobody wants to hire me, and I'm seen as the one who threw her own life away. Staying here feels pointless. I'm just scraping together what I can to afford a fresh start somewhere new, hoping that a change of scenery might actually help. For now, though, I'm just trying to get through each day. I'm stuck financially, my friends have disappeared, my family has given up on me, and I feel completely spent. Saying I've hit rock bottom feels almost like an understatement. I've done my share of soul searching, but it hasn't changed the reality I'm in. The consequences are still right here with no clear way out. This is where I am. Everything feels out of control, and honestly, I have no clue what's coming next.
This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started.
I had one too many drinks and woke up next to his best friend. What he did after that was something I never saw coming. Hello, Reddit. This is my first time posting, and I'm a little unsure if I'm doing it right, but here we go. I need a place to vent and hopefully get some feedback to help me talk to my husband and make him see reason. I genuinely think he's overreacting and blowing everything out of proportion. He should be able to let this go. So here's a bit of background to give you all some context. My name is Lillian, I'm 32, and my husband Michael is also 32. We've been together for about 3 years, and I've always felt we had a strong connection. I've put a lot of effort into making our relationship great. I'm also the kind of person who naturally draws attention. This attention can be both positive and negative. I know people envy my life, and honestly, I get it. My life is pretty close to perfect. I've got a stable job, a beautiful home, a husband who, most of the time, adores me. I tend to stand out. I'm smart, attractive, and carry myself confidently in any situation. That confidence can sometimes rub people the wrong way, but that's not really my problem. If people feel intimidated, that's on them. Not everyone has it this good. Michael and I balance each other well. He's steady, reliable, and always looks out for me, making sure I'm comfortable. He'd do just about anything to make me happy. By now, he should know he can trust me. He knows I'm loyal. But sometimes his desire to be so involved can feel stifling, almost clingy. I'm not delicate. I need a bit of space to be myself, to enjoy life without feeling scrutinized. Yes, I made a mistake. But I honestly think Michael could easily move past this. It's not like I planned it, and it's not like he didn't know who I was before we got together. Here's what went down. My husband's best friend, let's call him Samuel, was having a birthday party, a casual get-together with friends, music, and plenty of drinks. Naturally, Michael and I were both there. Samuel's his best friend after all. I wouldn't miss it, especially since Samuel always knows how to throw a fun party. This is where things started to unravel. I wasn't drinking much at first, mostly out of respect for Michael. We've had a lot of discussions lately about my drinking. He's convinced I'm overdoing it and keeps urging me to cut back. According to Michael, I'm heading down a slippery slope toward alcoholism, which feels like a total exaggeration. But he's been pressuring me to be more responsible about it, so I played along while he was there. Eventually, though, Michael wanted to head home while he was still sober, which didn't surprise me. He's not as much of a party person as I am. His idea of a good time is a quiet night with Netflix and takeout, while I live for a lively party. I told him I wanted to stay since the party was just getting good. We were surrounded by friends, and Samuel was the host, so Michael figured I'd be safe staying behind. He left, reassured by Samuel's promise that he'd either drop me off or find someone else who could. The plan seemed solid, so there I was, finally free to relax and enjoy myself. Once Michael was gone, I started drinking a lot more, just unwinding and having fun. I don't think there's anything wrong with letting loose once in a while. It's not like this is my everyday behavior. I know I made a mistake, but I don't think the blame is entirely on me for what happened next. Alcohol can make things feel different, make you feel looser and freer. The drinks were in control at that point, not me, and it wasn't like I was the only one indulging. Samuel was drinking pretty heavily, too. As the night wore on, people gradually started heading home. Eventually, it was just Samuel and me, alone. Looking back now, I realized that leaving would have been the right choice, though hindsight always brings clarity, doesn't it? The details are fuzzy, as if viewed through a fogged-up window, yet certain fragments stick. Moments of laughter, a sense of comfort, maybe even a touch of harmless flirtation. Conversations with Samuel always flowed naturally, and if I'm honest, there's always been an attraction there. I thought it was innocent. A fleeting chemistry, nothing more. But somehow, lines blurred, and when I opened my eyes the next morning, I was in his bed, lying next to him. No need to elaborate further. It was unmistakable. A line had been crossed, and I felt a wave of shock, completely unprepared for how quickly things had spiraled. This was never part of the plan. The alcohol had clouded my judgment, but Michael saw it differently. In his eyes, it was a deliberate betrayal, which couldn't have been further from the truth. The morning after, both Samuel and I were mortified. I hadn't intended for any of this to happen, but suddenly I was caught in a situation I'd never anticipated. With daylight flooding the room, reality felt uncomfortably sharp and unforgiving. We sat in strained silence, each grappling with the weight of what had unfolded. I started gathering my clothes from the floor, dressing quickly, and trying to pull my thoughts together. When I grabbed my phone next to my jeans, I saw a string of messages from Michael, who'd been trying to reach me, likely worried. Samuel was checking his phone too, and unsurprisingly, Michael had tried to contact him as well. Yet we remained silent, avoiding any mention of what was glaringly obvious. When I returned home, I immediately told Michael I'd overdone it with the drinking. It wasn't a lie. I definitely had too much. I knew he'd be upset, but the full truth would only make things worse. He launched into a lecture about my drinking, insisting I cut back, even suggesting support meetings, expressing his concern for my well-being. I apologized, hoping it would reassure him. I admitted he was right, which he appreciated, and that acknowledgement seemed to ease his frustration. Crisis averted, I thought. This way, he wouldn't feel the need to dig deeper. Over the following days, Samuel and I kept our distance, avoiding any direct contact, as if we had silently agreed to erase that night from memory. We even hung out with Michael in our usual group, maintaining a respectful distance, avoiding eye contact, acting like nothing had changed. Yes, it was awkward. But we both understood it was the simplest way forward. A few days later, I received a message from Samuel, a quick check-in to confirm we were on the same page. I told him to keep this entirely between us, not to mention it to Michael or anyone else. Samuel agreed immediately. He didn't want to risk his friendship with Michael either. Silence served us both. We valued what we had too much to endanger it, so staying quiet seemed like the most logical choice. Maybe it makes me sound selfish, but sometimes self-preservation takes over. I didn't want to throw away my marriage over a night that should never have happened. We agreed to keep Michael unaware, and I truly thought that would be the end of it. For me, it was finished. We'd moved on, and I had no intention of reopening that chapter. As the weeks passed, the weight slowly lifted, and I felt like I could breathe again. Life settled back into routine. I became more relaxed around Michael, less tense whenever Samuel's name came up. In time, I acted as if that night had never happened, and to be honest, it was a relief. Recognizing a hidden electric connection with Samuel wasn't some earth-shattering revelation, but it was undeniably exhilarating. Holding on to this secret, something Michael knew nothing about, brought a thrill I hadn't felt in years. Michael wasn't flawless, after all. I'd overlooked his shortcomings, his letdowns as a partner, more times than I cared to count. This small rebellion in my mind felt like a subtle way to balance things out. But soon enough, Samuel began to push boundaries. At first, he'd been as committed to keeping everything under wraps as I was. But then came the late-night texts, the hints about meeting up again, revisiting that night. He'd even suggested we figure out what this really means. Figure it out, as if it needed some grand meaning. I thought we both understood that night was an isolated moment, a one-time lapse that we'd leave in the past. But Samuel was clearly thinking differently. At first, I went along with his requests, mostly out of a sense of self-preservation. I didn't want him running to Michael, so keeping him placated seemed like the easiest route. But his lack of discretion grated on me. I should have known better than to expect maturity. It started with relentless texts, like we were in some secret romance. He'd ask to meet alone, hint at wanting more. It was painfully obvious he didn't understand that this wasn't some forbidden affair. It was a mistake, a single slip. but Samuel couldn't seem to see it that way. Then he began to ask for small favors, even bits of money, claiming he was short or needed a hand with bills. At first, giving him a bit here and there seemed like an easy way to keep him satisfied and quiet. He wasn't asking for much, and I thought he'd lose interest eventually. If I'm honest, there was still a bit of a thrill for me, a part of me still drawn to the secrecy, the forbidden excitement. So when he asked for other things, I didn't resist. There was a strange allure in hiding things in plain sight. I'd even convinced myself that keeping it all under wraps was a kindness, a way of sparing Michael. Why shatter his peace over something he'd never know about? In this case, I thought, ignorance was truly bliss. I didn't feel guilty. I felt like I had it all under control. Samuel seemed satisfied with the occasional favors, the sporadic cash. But over time, his demands escalated. He began to act entitled, like he had leverage over me. I despised it. Samuel started treating our secret as a tool for manipulation, with each new favor growing more audacious, like he was testing just how far I'd go. His entitlement grew intolerable, and I finally reached my breaking point. The thought of him holding anything over me was unbearable. I decided I was done. No more favors, no more cash. If he wanted to go to Michael, I'd take charge of the story myself. I'd be the one to tell him. So I prepared myself, donned a look of remorse, and sat down with Michael, framing Samuel as the one who had exploited the situation. It wasn't a complete lie. Samuel had made things unbearable. I told Michael about that night, about the drinks, about how Samuel had taken advantage of a vulnerable moment. Conveniently, I left out the ongoing exchanges, the money, the other favors. Those details were unnecessary. Michael seemed shell-shocked, almost as if he thought I was playing some cruel joke. He even asked if it was some kind of test to gauge his reaction. But once he realized I was serious, I saw something shift in his expression. A look that told me he was now seeing me as someone altogether unfamiliar. When he asked to see my phone, I felt a wave of dread wash over me, caught completely off guard by his sudden request. Lacking any prepared excuse, I handed it over, clinging to the hope that he wouldn't find anything incriminating. But fate wasn't on my side. I'd forgotten to delete Samuel's messages, the ones where he boldly laid out his intentions toward me. I watched Michael's face twist, the shock quickly giving way to disgust. His expression hardened as he scrolled through each message, his disappointment hardening into rage. He demanded to know how long I'd been deceiving him, how long I'd let Samuel infiltrate our marriage like this. It dawned on me right then. Everything was spiraling out of my control. Reaching for my phone, I tried to take it back, but Michael yanked it away and hurled it at me in frustration. The argument that erupted was fierce and unrelenting. He accused me of betraying him, said things I never thought I'd hear from him, and dismissed every explanation I attempted to offer. Then, in a move I hadn't seen coming, he told me to get out. Michael stared at me with an unfamiliar coldness, declaring he couldn't stand to have me in his sight any longer. He pushed me out of our home, and I was left in shock, grappling with the reality that he was serious. With nowhere else to go, I found myself at Samuel's, thinking he'd let me crash for the night. But he wouldn't even let me in. Michael had already called him, and Samuel, clearly rattled, was pulling away. He called me foolish for letting Michael discover the messages, and claimed he'd only been bluffing about bringing things to light. Now here I am, painfully aware that I've shattered my life for nothing. I've lost Michael, and Samuel has shut me out. I'm staying with my parents, who are barely concealing their disappointment. Our relationship has always been tense, and now they're making it clear that they're not pleased with my choices either. I feel lost, unsure of my next move, and completely alone. I think Michael's reaction is overblown. Doesn't he realize that by coming clean, I was trying to repair things? I wanted to save our relationship by being honest, but Michael's being unreasonable, and Samuel is the real issue here, not me. Update. So Reddit, thanks for nothing. I wasn't expecting praise, but I'd hoped for a bit of guidance, maybe some advice on what to do next, or even a bit of support with handling things with Michael. Instead, all I got was judgment. Some of you seem to thrive on this kind of drama, more interested in tearing me down than actually offering help. This is exactly why I hesitated to post on Reddit. It often feels like the worst aspects of social media rolled into one. But you know what? Since so many of you seem invested in my story, I'll keep updating. Oddly enough, it feels cathartic to have somewhere to vent, so here's what's happening now. I'm still at my parents' house, and it's as uncomfortable as you'd expect. They're barely speaking to me and clearly want me out, but it seems they don't quite know how to handle it. Neither of us wants me to be here, but they're also aware I don't have a job and wouldn't have anywhere to go if they asked me to leave. As much as we don't see eye to eye, I think they're hesitant to just throw me out. And if they did, I'd probably guilt them into letting me stay longer because I have no other options. I can't afford a place or even storage for my things. So here I am, stuck in this awkward limbo. Meanwhile, Michael's actions have made it crystal clear he's done with me, and it's starting to feel suspicious. The way he's pushing things along makes me wonder if he already has someone else waiting in the wings. Maybe he's been seeing someone else and just wants me out of the picture so he can move on. Yes, I made mistakes. Okay, maybe more than one. But this is my first time, and I can't understand why he's treating it like it's the end of the world. Every conversation with him now turns into a reminder that I must direct any communication through his lawyer. It's as though he's racing to erase me from his life, and it's taking every ounce of energy I have left. Speaking of drained, let's talk about my job, or rather, my former job. Out of the blue, I was let go. I'm almost positive Michael had something to do with it. Since he was the one who helped me land the job initially, it's not far-fetched to think he might have influenced my sudden firing. In fact, during a phone call, he even hinted he'd make me pay for cheating on him, and then, as if by some twisted design, I found myself unemployed. My savings were already stretched thin, and it didn't help that Michael had emptied our joint bank account. So now here I am, back at my parents' house with no job and no money. I'm starting to wonder if there's any legal action I could take against him. Maybe if I find a lawyer who works on contingency, I might stand a chance. Does anyone out there know if I'd have a case? On a somewhat lighter note, I heard from mutual friends that Samuel lost his job as well. Honestly, it feels like a little bit of karma. After he turned me away when I asked if I could stay at his place once Michael kicked me out, I decided to cut him off. Now he's facing his own unemployment struggles, and apparently he's panicking, because he doesn't have any savings either. So, while we're both having a hard time, at least he's not in a better position than I am. So that's where things stand. Let's see if anyone has helpful advice this time. Update. For those wondering, here's the latest. Unfortunately, it's not as encouraging as I'd hoped. I met with a lawyer as planned, but they said I don't have much of a case against Michael. Without concrete evidence that he was responsible for my firing, it wouldn't be worth pursuing. I even tried texting him, hoping he might slip up and admit something incriminating, but he kept his composure, feigning ignorance to everything I hinted at. So that plan fell flat. It's frustrating, but it looks like I'll have to move on and find another job. And let me tell you, job hunting is exhausting. I'd forgotten how draining it could be, but I don't really have a choice unless I want to end up broke and without a place to stay. My parents aren't exactly being delicate about it either. They actually sat me down to say they expect me to contribute toward rent and the bills. My own parents. It's as if they have no idea how difficult things are for me right now, yet they're already asking for money. I was taken aback, but honestly, I don't have anywhere else to turn, so I agreed, but only on the condition that I'll start paying once I find a job. And as if things couldn't get more complicated, I was just served with divorce papers from Michael's lawyer. I guess he's set on finishing this process. Honestly, I don't even care anymore. I used to, but now I just feel numb. This mess isn't all my fault, but he refuses to even acknowledge that. He knows how I get when I drink, yet he's blowing this one mistake out of proportion. Looking back, I probably should have expected this from him. Michael has never been one to consider anyone else's perspective. So here he is, showing his true self. Fine. I'm done wasting my energy on this. I'll pick up the pieces and rebuild my life, whether he's there or not. It's been ages since I thought about this post. Honestly, I forgot it even existed until I stumbled across my own story on TikTok by pure chance. The comments were relentless. People wasted no time in tearing me apart, tossing out every insult you could imagine. I guess I expected the criticism, but that didn't soften the blow. I've been stuck in survival mode for so long that I haven't had the space or energy to reflect on much else. Life hasn't turned out the way I envisioned, and now it's all coming to a head. I'm finally starting to see just how much I contributed to my own spiraled downward dot. The reality hit hard when the divorce was finalized. I left with absolutely nothing. No alimony, no financial support, nothing. They said I didn't qualify because I'm healthy, had once held a job, and because our marriage didn't last long enough to warrant it. So that was that. Michael completely erased me from his life, as though I never mattered at all. The shock of it hasn't faded, Dot. It felt like a harsh wake-up call. I reached out for the first time, hoping that now that everything was settled, we might start fresh, maybe even rebuild. But he's ignored every message, every attempt to reconnect. I'm at a loss. I'm finally accepting that the blame lies with me, that this was my doing. Michael had no hand in the chaos I created, and now I'm facing the consequences alone. To make things worse, I haven't been able to find work for months. Part of me wonders if Michael blacklisted me. We're in the same field, and he has some influence. Finding a job without connections is hard enough, but if he's actively blocking me, it would explain a lot. Even my parents have reached their breaking point. They're done waiting for me to figure things out, and I can't blame them. Now I'm completely on my own, staying wherever I can. Couch surfing, sometimes in shelters, and even on the streets. I've sold everything of value I had, every item that could bring in money, since I couldn't afford storage and needed cash just to survive. I even tried starting a GoFundMe, but it went nowhere. No one seems interested in lending a hand. I've hit rock bottom. Some days I barely scrape by enough to eat, and my only goal is to save for a cheap car, just so I have somewhere to sleep. I never imagined things would come to this, that I'd be grateful just for minimum wage work, but here I am. I'm applying everywhere, fast food joints, anything that might help me get by, even if it barely covers the essentials. But it's hard to come to terms with the fact that no one seems to care. Not my parents, not my friends, no one. I know I brought this on myself, but facing it all alone is excruciating. This is my reality now. I'm sure people will mock me for sharing this, but I don't care anymore. I know I was selfish. I know I made terrible choices, and now I'm living with the consequences every single day.
This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.